All right. So we've seen over in Southeast Asia that there's been an uptick in M&A activity, and then I end up running across a report that made me want to just jump into that conversation. So, quick gut check for every founder in Southeast Asia is you shouldn't really be asking just how do we grow, but it's asking about will this survive what's coming. Companies these days, whether you're a startup or a big corporate around the region, companies that transform while they transact are delivering significantly more shareholder returns, upwards of over 400% over the last decade, and that is significantly outpacing the S&P. It's a different game. It's a different scoreboard. Deloitte just ended up coming out with a new M&A playbook, which is the idea of what we're going to be talking about here today.
And the number is like three times S&P, so that's pretty big. And translation, if your M&A playbook is buy for skill, cut some costs, you're bringing a butter knife to a lightsaber fight.
We're going to unpack a little bit about this report, some of the playbook, and unpack how Southeast Asia winners need to build capability stacks during the deal, not after. There's 6 practices that they highlight. We're talking real receipts, no fluff.
And welcome back to the Sea of Startups. I'm Kim. He's Kevin. If you're a founder, operator, or investor who is, well, allergic to passwords, good. This is the anti-password episode. And let's get into it.
Old school M&A is very sequential. You buy, you integrate it, and maybe you worry about transforming later. But transformational M&A is running this strategy plus execution plus transformation all in parallel, and it's blending the defensive resilience, cost excellence, value chain strength with the offensive tactics of tech adjacencies, ecosystems, and so on.
And it's a hybrid if you think about it. And these are the 6 habits that show up in outliers. So number 1 is leadership mandate. Number 2 is the always on portfolio. Number 3 is transform as you transact. So everything is done concurrently. And AI at the core, which relates again to point number 3, and power and collaboration. And the last one is with AI, in the picture right now, workforce is changing at a rapid pace. Workforce for tomorrow, and you got to pin this because we'll thread them through in the next few examples coming up. And why this matters now and C is because capital is choosy, cross-border complexity is a moat, and slow integrators are getting eaten. And because we live in hyperloop right now, things are changing so fast. The founders who can change shape without losing their soul, they win.
This is important for a number of reasons. Southeast Asia does not have a massive amount of M&A activity. Historically, most of this sort of build versus buy decision making that the large conglomerates have been making has always been skewed towards the build. It's been a little bit problematic in regards to the activity, especially when you start talking about acquiring startups and the activity there. But we have seen more and more players from outside the region coming in and doing similar sort of playbooks as this Deloitte report started coming out. So I think that the two prong of this is really that we need to see a lot more of the existing corporates in the region thinking about growth, offense, and defense through the M&A lens. And we also need to look from a startup standpoint of building out and accelerating our growth, not solely from the organic building, but also from acquisitions can accelerate that growth.
Let's do receipts and let's just look at a couple of examples and be C specific. I get that there are not many M&As coming out of Southeast Asia, but if you think about it, Grab seems to be the poster child for programmatic capability stacking transformation. Or if you look at the other one, Kudo, O2O Rails into Indonesia's unbanked, and it integrated with GrabPay. So that's another example of the power of collaboration, and which led to acquisition as well. Like Bento, acqui-hired robo advisory, rebranded Grab Invest to put wealth in app, and then the digital full bank license, Grab Singtel wins, the Monetary Authority of Singapore's green light, no cost synergy, but business model surface area. And then you have another one that's, Jaya Grocer, which I think any Malaysian would know of. They are the majority stake and enabled grocery and demand and increased their retail footprint. So that's one way to look at it. And it's not just the random deals that Grab is doing. They're literally, for lack of better word, and pun intended, very much, they're grabbing onto any opportunity that comes their way. And that's every piece that's fortifying the super app thesis. It's distribution, it's data, it's daily habit, it's really in some way of the word, it's creating its own ecosystem that is robust, that is resilient to a lot of things. But the thing is, on the flip side, it's not making much money. So
Yeah, Grab definitely isn't necessarily printing money in the land of profitability. But they did end up building out more capabilities. They needed to get the finance side of it. They wanted to get more offerings for the Grab delivery services so that they could make further utilization of that fleet. So they did those acquisitions did make sense. Now, I don't know. I never dug into the numbers in regards to the ROI. So flashing back to that Deloitte number of the 400%, but certainly they have ended up driving some defensiveness of the business and some synergies there. But we're also seeing. I mean, one of the it's not just the local players, the startups that have been acquiring in. I mean, in the news just recently was foreign player media company Publicis that just acquired a company that was in the news this week as well. So we do actually see a lot of M&A. M&A does happen. The challenge is that the majority that's leading the M&A process in Southeast Asia oftentimes is coming from abroad. The primary acquirers, they're coming in, they're acquiring into the region, and they're going to be building a lot of capabilities coming into here. There is a necessity for some of the existing companies, again, whether you're startups or later, to start looking at it and thinking about increasing your surface area and increasing your coverage and taking the tactical approach of figuring out how M&A fits into the scheme of things. There's a number of examples across the region that we could point to. You just were talking about Grab. I mean, not necessarily a company that's printing money, but Ninja Van did a ton of acquisitions as well. I think some of that may end up having to be unwound because of some of the challenges. But you also have a number of other ones, and within the corporate realm, unfortunately, not as many examples that we could point to.
not many, but still pretty notable ones. At least these ones have become pretty much the household names of Southeast Asia. Say, for example, Property Guru, before and around its 2022 SPAC. And they didn't just add listings, they built data, mortgages, development site, SaaS. Timing was rough, but the capability thesis was sound. In just last year, 10 months ago, they were taken private by a 1.1 billion deal by EQT. And again, this is just one of the prime examples of capability is more than a category label. And on the flip side, just right across the causeway, DBS is a corporate site masterclass. It's one of the banks in it's the bank in Singapore, a 27,000 person tech company that happens to be a bank. Taken banking to a different level. It's now a tech company which is doing banking as well. And they do DBS quick finance that uses data AI to shrink SME loan journeys from days to near instant for pre-qualified segments. It's not a cost stream, and it's a product advantage. With AI capability, almost every company now, it's turning to be a tech company. Everywhere is tech. You have tech this, tech that, and Singapore is pretty much all things tech at this point.
It's a good,
Yeah.
It's a good time to
It
be in tech.
is.
I think more and more of these corporates should hopefully be waking up to it, and
Yeah.
realizing that they don't have, well, most of them don't have the in-house capabilities. Most
No.
corporates just do not. And so the logical thing for many of them to be thinking about is to go out and acquire those skill sets. And that oftentimes means M&A activity, acquihires, maybe just strategic partnerships if it doesn't need to be deeply integrated. But I think we're going to start seeing M&A becoming a much more relevant piece of the equation. And I'm hopeful that a lot of the local companies, big and small, start waking up to the reality that in order for them to keep up, they're probably not going to be able to hire their way into this. They're either going to end up having to onboard more software, or they're going to end up having to acquire their way into it in order to get the digital transformation that I believe that they actually need.
Yeah, and now it makes me think, in this AI era, it's moving so fast. And there are so many AI companies in this region as well. Not as famous as the one globally like Lovable and Superbase. And there are even in the ecosystem as well. There are so many build cups that are coming up, especially on Luma. If you're Luma, I'm on the AI segment. I see so many activities going on. Then my next question would be, given like what you said, that M&A, it's going to be increasingly more relevant. What's the vibe coding scene like in Southeast Asia? Because this is one of the ways that we could accelerate AI adoption, right? And then from there, it kind of trickles through the company-wide point of view. And how does that look like, you think?
A lot of corporates are going to start having a different balance in regards to the build versus buy. So the computational thought process that a
Mm-hmm.
company goes through, generally speaking, comes down to the build versus buy. And the dynamic that tipped the scales oftentimes was the complexity and the resources required to build and maintain ended up being too much. And oftentimes they would simply buy software, or they would buy a company and integrate it. More often than not, you're just simply buying software. But what's going on these days, and I don't think that the mainstream vibe coding tools are really going to change this, because like not Lovable, not Replete, not any of those ones that are presently the most commonly talked about. Those are for the low end of the spectrum in regards to what you're trying to build. For the most part, you're not going to ship. You're not going to be able to produce enterprise ready or enterprise grade products, at least not yet. But some of the other tooling, if you're using Cursor or some of the other, if you already have technical resources that have some level of savviness, they become super powered with this. So the entire dynamic of build versus buy that plays into the decision to buy software, it plays into the decision for M&A activity, that is shifting. So while I am optimistic that I think M&A activity is going to be on the rise, I am cognizant of the fact that teams are becoming leaner, and that if you do have the in-house capability, you do have the ability to build a lot of things. That doesn't mean necessarily that M&A is going to go away, because buying the product is only part of the equation. A lot of times you can copy a product. Many times when you're going into M&A, you're buying a team, you're buying distribution, you're buying customers, you're buying much more than just the product itself. That might be some intellectual property, but the key to it, because as we say in venture a lot, ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is what matters. That's the
Yeah.
key component when you start talking about it. You're buying the machine, not the idea of how a car works. You're buying the car.
It's very product focused again in some ways. It's like it's after all of the ideas and execution, what's the end product that M&A is trying to gonna happen, right? That's what you're looking at. And to your point about how companies are getting leaner, like for example, Ara Finance, a company that we also featured. I've connected with one of their people from the operations side, and it's just operating on 100 people basis. Given that how fast it's growing, it's relying a lot on AI, and just that's just one example about how lean organizations are becoming nowadays, and the future of workforce it gets more competitive, and more people are just fighting for one role. It begs the question that anyone who's in this workforce is looking for work has to have AI in their back pocket. You cannot not have it. Yeah, that's a bit of a digress, but yeah.
It does kind of come into the aspects. So like if we link back to some of the uh, tactical components of this report on M&A, when it was talking about the playbook, the number one aspect that they listed on there was leadership. And I think leadership
Yeah.
does come from an aspect of being able to understand the necessity of the skills required for the organization of the future, and thinking through not just that, but as well as the many other considerations in regards to what it means to succeed and win a market in Southeast Asia, which is the regional thinking, understanding of the regional patchwork. It also means that you're having to have solid understanding of the technical capabilities, because ultimately the fragmented markets, dealing with the archipelago of Philippines and Indonesia, dealing with the complexity of the borders, the infrastructure, all of these different aspects, a lot of those end up becoming more technical problems competing against for the companies that are moving forward with strong leadership in those respects, or having that lens associated with it. I think they're going to be at a competitive advantage. So that's one of the tactical lenses that were in that report.
In total so far, and they highlighted 6. So the second one is about the always on portfolio. So it's pretty much treating products in geographies like how Temasek treats assets, right? Like they're prune, they double down and they rotate. And instead of looking at typical revenue P&Ls, they are looking at capability P&Ls. It's looking at a broad level about how everything comes together than just looking at one dimension information, which how we used to, at least at from a financial standpoint. But now it's like it's very strategic how you can see all coming together, how it fits into the revenue, how it kind of affects expenses and what to cut, what not to cut. It's not just looking at just expenses as a line item, but what contributes to the expenses or what contributes to the revenue. So it's more on a pretty much comprehensive and well-rounded basis, and being always on with AI now, with tech being so instrumental in part of our lives, you always have to be on. So I think it kind of translates into that always on portfolio. It's not just us; it's also within the company, within the portfolio, within the P&L that it's always going to be there. And in today's market, dead weight just kills optionality. You got to you got to look at things from a 360 view rather than a 180 view, right? From the report as well, what I got to take away is that instead of software as a service, now it's literally like what we said, right? 360 view is transformation as a service. You transform as you transact, and you start the operating models and culture integration during due diligence. So if you bolt on it later, you've bought shelfware. So it's pretty much go not pay as you go, but transform as you go.
That links into the other one, which as they put it, it's transform as you transact, which like really means basically doing away with the linear approach where it's kind of this stage sort of pre-deal strategy, then you move on sequentially to the post-deal execution. Instead, what they're talking about, and the way to optimize the outcomes, is you're starting the transformation aspects from the pre-deal stage. The moment that you start thinking about it, you're starting the transformation process. You're starting the aspects of understanding the transformational imperatives associated with it, whether you're talking about the digital platforms, data architecture, technical capabilities. You're working those into the strategy and the execution from the early stages, as opposed to waiting until after the fact. And I think, historically, the thing that I took away on this is that there's been data in the past that talks about the frequency of failures of M&A activities. And the takeaway here for me is partially that when done poorly, you can have poor results. When done well, you can end up having great results. And I think that's the aspect of proper planning and proper implementation from day one, not waiting until the end of it and being proactive as opposed to reactive. That's the approach that they seem to be pushing as your ability to scale earlier, accelerate the transformation. So as you're transacting, you're not necessarily starting from step zero. You're actually at the point where as you're integrating, you're simply accelerating what's already there. So the loss of time, you're able to deliver significantly more value in there. And there's, as I said, you simply have less post-deal integration time, and the resource burden becomes less if that process is starting from the very beginning.
If that's the case, if a lot of people are taking proactive stance now, then would that mean that although, acquisition will still happen, but sometimes when you sell off part of your company, it also means that you lose control. Then my next question, do you think that more startups would be keen to that aspect of being acquired? Because I'm reading so much about how there are many startups and many founders who are not that keen on going the VC route, rather, but just to build what they have before getting acquired.
What I'm talking about is the from the
Am
perspective
I?
of the acquirer. So
It's a
that's all
money
from
thing, yeah.
the
Okay,
acquirer. So
got it, got
you
it.
are going to have a
Yeah,
loss of control
yeah,
because you're
yeah,
being acquired. You're now part
yeah,
of a bigger organization.
yeah,
Now, I've heard a lot of people have saying that they're not thinking about that pathway.
yeah,
But to be honest with you, when you've been working and building and going through the struggles for a handful of years, or if somebody comes around and starts offering you more money than you've ever seen in your life, that decision starts becoming a lot easier.
yeah. Yeah, there are many like AI, Sam Altman, all these stories. They do have those stories. It's a good point to note, but then again, it depends on how much of your soul that you're willing to sell and your hard work that you're willing to sell to lose that control. Again, it's a very
I
personal
mean, there's always
decision.
time for a second or third act. I
That's
guess
true.
as I tell people, exits are may not always come back. So if
Yeah,
somebody if a corporate comes around and is interested in acquiring you, they're doing it for strategic reason. So if you
yeah,
say no, don't think
yeah,
that they're going to stop and give up on the entire idea that made them attracted to want to acquire you in the first place. They will
right.
likely find another way. They may end up acquiring somebody else. They may end up prioritizing another option, and you're well off, or they may end up becoming a competitor. But the option that you still have them anytime you want to be acquired is simply not true. And so I've seen many times where acquisition offers were on the table, and then things go sour and they are no longer there. So many times, especially when it's really life changing amounts of money,
Right.
I would always encourage startup founders to think very hard about it. Now, if it's extremely undervaluing the company, that's a completely different story. If you know you've built something and most people are in agreement that you've built something that's worth $100 million and somebody comes around and offers you 20, sure, your life could change with $20 million, but that's a pretty gross undervaluation.
Again, it's a lot about context. Context just matters as to how much you're looking
Mm,
at, and you just want to undersell yourself. Getting back to it is that the fourth one would be AI at the core. This is not cost out, it's a business model shift. Underwriting, route optimization, pricing, discovery. I mean, if your M&A thesis doesn't have an AI spine, it's in this day and age, it's pretty much half baked. It can't the skill that you're supposed to grow. I don't think it will have that speed. So AI has to be at the core. There's no two ways about it.
one that's pretty good for Southeast Asia is the collaboration power that they put here. I mean, Southeast Asia is not homogeneous. It's a collection of a bunch of countries. It is is designed for figuring out a collaborative approach, partnerships. You have a number of different ecosystem players that can all play a role, whether you're talking about the hyperscalers, local conglomerates, agencies. You got to play well with the different governments and agencies and so on and so forth. Especially if you're going for M&A, you're thinking about building ecosystems. You're thinking about collaboration, not just purely on the acquisition, in order to extract some more value out of that activity.
Networking in Southeast Asia may be a bit different. I'm not saying that being on the other end of the world, Silicon Valley is similar, but at least in Southeast Asia, it's a bit different in the sense that there are people from different parts of the country, with different parts of the region, who have different cultural nuances. Not as similar as maybe in Silicon Valley, whereby things are still different given that it's a melting pot of cultures. But in terms of Southeast Asia, uh, uh, it's more explicit. It's more very obvious that there are differences in terms of culture, in terms of languages. Like for example, Thailand is really quite hard to penetrate because of the language barrier. Or Philippines, like I said, is an archipelago of islands,
Mm.
so there's that operational inaccessibility. And Indonesia as well, huge market, but again not as robust in terms of regulations. Surviving in Southeast Asia, it's still quite tricky. Networking in that sense, when you've met someone who is really great, you kind of have to leverage on that, and then collaboration becomes powerful. That's what at least I take from it. And I think the next one would be the workforce for tomorrow. Integration is a people sport. So coming back to leadership again, a good leader means it's able to look from a point of view whereby they're able to look at the big picture and integrate everything together. And leadership also means it's a people game. So being able to have all that into one and being able to lead with some empathy, being more human, helps a lot. Because with AI coming into play, humanity, having that heart in this day and age, it's not as obvious as before. You kind of have to put it out there, in terms of connections. That's why there are so many networking activities right now whereby we're trying to connect that human touch to technology, which makes it more, short of more meaningful. Upskilling and culture are the hidden synergies for sure. And in C's multilingual, multi-rec environment, pretty much this is your bedrock. Yeah.
So moving along. I mean, over the next couple years, we're gonna I believe we're gonna see an increase in M&A activity across Southeast Asia. I think we can already see in the data that we're seeing an acceleration. I think most of it still is coming cross border. We're still seeing foreign players coming in, acquiring their way into the region, playing that playbook. We'll start seeing some of the local players over time start following this approach. But in regards to the strategy and tactics, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of this approach of transformation focus becoming really a category of M&A activity, which is building alongside the management, and you're going to see a whole crop of folks. I mean, there's always been M&A advisors and whatnot, but the same way that we've started seeing AI transformation and all of this, we're going to see the similar sort of rhyme in regards to M&A style advisory being built around digital transformation and kind of integration, etc. But in the lens of this kind of approach.
And AI-enabled M&A becomes table stakes. It's integrated in almost every aspect of the M&A process. It's even targeting, diligence, and synergy capture modeled near real time. Even on a day-to-day basis, when you do business development, you still need to use AI. So it's pretty much the same concept in terms when you use it in M&A as well. Teams who don't, you kind of lose out on speed and accuracy. The leading banks, operators already show the pattern. JP Morgan has their own AI as well. They've already do away with the analysts. That's one way to look at it. And as much as I want to say that AI is integral, but I don't think AI would replace jobs because you still need that human touch anyway. But but the thing is, the winning point or the competitive advantage that someone would have over the other is knowing how to use AI, particularly prompt engineering. That's so important because it saves so much time if you know the way to use it, the right way to use it.
Yeah, I mean, just back on the AI enabled them, I can tell you from my own standpoint, the amount of automation in the investment process, without a doubt, it's always going to end up being there, because a lot of the work. But we're leading into this, we're probably going to end up seeing that make an uptick in the amount of deals that are able to get done, as the analysis, as the targeting, as the specialization starts getting easier, and the integration thereof starts becoming easier because of some of these tooling. And this maybe is a little bit further out of a prediction. But as we have an ease of integration, we should anticipate that there would be an increase of it. So we'll probably see more of the programmatic M&A capital, that where you have these corporates that just go on buying sprees. Maybe not the way that like GE back in the day, when he just basically bought anything that he could get his fingers on. But in all honesty, like when you look at like tech companies in the Bay Area, I think Google does like 100 acquisitions a year, or at least they did back before the competition the what was it, the Federal Trade Commission there started blocking them, and you started getting regulators in the way. But those companies are very programmatic with the way that they acquire, and I would love to see some of that style, maybe a little bit more measured approach, looking at multi-deal transformational pools, looking at understanding the dynamic of Southeast Asia market by market, building up and being more programmatic with it.
Any companies that you're looking at, like,
You've seen players historically, like the
yeah.
largest, like the ride hailing was obviously the one which they did a bunch of different acquisitions, both Grab and GoCheck. But to be honest with you, like that's not a super common strategy or playbook. M&A is just not is still not super common out here. A lot of it just does not go down that road. And so much of the M&A that we see falls into one of two buckets. We see M&A that's very preemptive of super early teams. So we do see a lot of like Series A level acquisitions in the sort of like sub 15, sub $20 million range. A lot of which are happening at even lower valuations. So we do see a lot of that. Anything above that range is generally coming from a foreign acquirer, where they're basically buying their way into the region. But it's not for a lack of capital. It's not like the region lacks the capital. It's not that the conglomerates lack the capital. But there is definitely a blocker. But I think over time we'll start seeing that shift. The winds are turning. I think over time we're going to start seeing the local players realize that they need to start getting in the game on the technology side, and that M&A is probably going to be one of the drivers. So I think that's going to tick up over, say, the next, maybe a little bit longer term for the local players, maybe 5 years, 3 5.
Well, that's a long time in today's timelines. But then again, what would be, you think, the catalyst, apart from what we have talked about, the main one of the catalysts that would enable more M&As coming in, apart from, yeah,
Most of it just comes down to the competitive threat. I mean, for the most
right.
part, when you look around the region, people have these insular moats. You have a lot of like concession economies, where you are the de facto monopoly because you are the sole one that has the permission to import Toyota, or you are the sole one that has the permission to do this activity, or there's only three people that have permission to do the cross border truck freight, or like you have a bunch of these sort of protected castles.
Mm.
But as the region develops, inevitably there's going to be more inter-region competition. The rest of the world is waking up to the potential of Southeast Asia. So the competitive forces, I think, are going to end up pushing the hand.
I hope so too, because the thing is, Southeast Asia, it's still very much relationship based, and there's so many family offices that I think it's one of the reasons why M&A activity is not as happening, because it's still family oriented to a certain extent. So that's what I'm getting, at least from my understanding of the region.
There's a number of the family businesses out and around the region that have started to
Right.
get picked up by private equity firms. These are larger firms. They're going to change the management. They're going to change the culture. They may end up over a little bit more of extended period of time. Again, sticking with I say 3 to 5 for the local firms. You may end up
Mm-hmm.
seeing the fingerprints of these private equity players that are acquiring into these companies start changing the way that the dynamics are. But
Mm-hmm.
it is true when you have many of these family run businesses, they've historically always been on the traditional sort of approach because they've always run this way. When there
Yeah.
are new businesses, they're usually being started by a family member and
Yeah.
being folded up into the overall family business. It's always been more of a build and own as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to buy,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
which in all honesty carries more risk. I mean, there's no good data around on it, but like when you
Mm-hmm.
go and have conversations with a lot of folks, there's so many sort of like lost their shirt doing this. I don't like technology because we had this bad experience, or like
Yeah.
there's a surprisingly large number of bad experiences with them trying to go it alone, but yet they still do.
Yeah, and it doesn't help them, right? In the long run, like they lose out, is what I'm saying. As much as they are doing well now, but the chances of them to keep up with the current trends, uh, they can't stay long in where they are. So let us wrap up. 3 reps to start building your transformer muscle. I'll start with them. So the first one is 5 decision audit. Label your last 5 big calls in defense and versus offense. Do a chart. I mean, if it's all in one column, rebalance this quarter. Second would be live capability target list. 10 companies, partners, tech that you buy, partner, or replicate. Refresh monthly. Treat it like a pipeline, not a wish list. This is just a guide again. Put transformation on the board agenda. I think this is really important. 3 to 5 year capability map. Hopefully by then the companies have already grown up where they're supposed to be, and then M&A is really out there. What's build versus buy versus collaborate by quarter. Um,
If anyone doesn't have like team members or people that are in charge of this, I think most sophisticated organizations have a corp dev department, and they're the ones that are basically doing these activities. So if you
yeah.
don't have someone, you need to think about who on your team should be doing this. If you're an early stage startup, that's the founding team. If you're a larger corporate, it means that you need the talent set to specifically focus on that because you're talking much bigger. So that's how you protect and grow, and you can scale faster and create more defensive moats.
And if this sparked ideas, let us know. I mean, you could DM us on LinkedIn. We are reachable. Or watch our YouTube, leave a comment. Or, I mean, LinkedIn is the best way to reach us. Tell us your best transform while you transact story if you have one. Or if there's an example, drop us a comment, leave a text, slide into our DMs, whichever works best for you. We just want more stories. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. We'll be back with more relevant stuff, and transformation is in motion. And this is the Sea of Startups.